Nestled in the vibrant, sunlit streets of Key West, Florida, stands the Ernest Hemingway House, a stately Spanish colonial-style home shrouded in ivy and tropical flora. Though celebrated for its literary significance and the six-toed cats roaming its grounds, whispers of the supernatural have haunted its halls for decades. Local guides and visitors alike recount chilling encounters in Hemingway's cherished library, where he penned some of his most famous works. Late one evening in 1976, a caretaker closing up for the night heard the unmistakable sound of a typewriter clacking in the library. Curious, he approached, only to find the room bathed in a golden light, though no lamps were on. In the chair where Hemingway used to sit, the faint outline of a burly man was visible, his fingers ghosting over the keys of an invisible typewriter. As the caretaker blinked, the figure dissolved into the air. Over the years, guests have reported smelling cigar smoke in the library, a signature of Hemingway, who was rarely seen without a stogie in his lifetime. One visitor, a novelist seeking inspiration, claimed she felt an invisible hand on her shoulder as she browsed the bookshelves. When she turned, no one was there, but she distinctly heard a deep, resonant voice murmur, "Keep writing." Perhaps the most famous incident occurred in the early 2000s, when a team of paranormal investigators spent the night in the house. While setting up their equipment in the library, one of the investigators caught a fleeting glimpse of Hemingway's reflection in an antique mirror. Startled, they turned to see the room empty, but a faint impression lingered in the dust on the chair, like someone had just risen from it. Unlike many haunted houses, the spirit of Ernest Hemingway doesn't seem malevolent. Visitors describe his presence as one of quiet reassurance, as though the writer's restless energy remains tethered to the home he once adored. A guide who has worked there for over 30 years remarked, "Hemingway loved this house. If he's still here, it's because he doesn't want to leave." In 2018, a young couple touring the house captured what they claim is photographic evidence of Hemingway's ghost. In the photo, taken in the library, a faint figure wearing a white shirt and suspenders is visible near the window. Though skeptics dismissed it as a trick of the light, those familiar with Hemingway's spirit see it as proof of his eternal connection to the place. To this day, the Ernest Hemingway House remains a magnet for both literature lovers and ghost hunters. Whether you come for the history or the hauntings, one thing is certain: the essence of Hemingway lives on in Key West, Florida. For years, one particular item in Hemingway's library has captured the curiosity of both staff and visitors. An imposing oak desk, said to be one of his favorites. After Hemingway's passing, the desk was locked, and the key has been missing ever since. Attempts to force it open were abandoned after strange occurrences. A carpenter hired to unlock it complained of a sudden stabbing headache and left abruptly, never returning to finish the job. Some say the desk holds unfinished manuscripts, Hemingway's private letters, or even a journal detailing his final days. Others whisper of something darker, cursed artifacts or writings that Hemingway himself may have wanted hidden from the world. Whatever the truth, the desk remains untouched, but late at night, staff sometimes hear soft, rhythmic tapping coming from within, as if someone or something is inside, trying to get out. One foggy evening in the off-season, a lone guest, an elderly professor from Michigan, stayed behind after the tour. He asked if he could sit in the library for a while, claiming it was his lifelong dream to feel the energy of Hemingway's creative space. The staff reluctantly agreed, locking him in for the night with a flashlight and strict instructions to stay within the library. Hours later, the morning staff found the professor sitting stiffly in Hemingway's chair, his face pale and his eyes wide with an unblinking stare. He was alive but refused to speak of what he had seen. Only days later did he send a letter to the house's curator, writing cryptically, "I believe I was not alone. He spoke to me not with words, but with his presence. Tell no one what I'm about to say. But the desk, it isn't empty." The six-toed cats that roam the Hemingway property are often regarded as quirky descendants of Hemingway's own pets. However, some locals believe these cats serve as guardians of the house, protecting it and perhaps the spirit of Hemingway from those who seek to disturb its peace. One such belief stems from an unsettling event in 2021. A group of amateur ghost hunters snuck onto the property after hours, armed with EMF meters and cameras. As they entered the library, the cats, usually friendly and aloof, began circling them, hissing and yowling in unison. The leader of the group tried to shoo them away, but the air grew oppressively cold, and one of their flashlights flickered and died. Moments later, one of the hunters swore they saw a figure standing at the top of the staircase. Watching them, a figure they later described as a towering man with a beard and piercing eyes. Terrified, the group fled, leaving their equipment behind. When staff found the devices the next morning, all the footage had been corrupted, save for one eerie sound recording. On it, a low voice can be heard saying just 2 words, "Get out." The mystery of Hemingway's enduring presence in his Key West home remains unsolved. Yet every visitor leaves with the feeling that the house is alive, that the great writer is still weaving tales or guarding his secrets from the other side. What lies within the locked desk? What keeps him tethered to this earthly realm? And what would happen if someone finally disturbed his sanctuary? The rumors about the locked desk grew louder after the professor's mysterious experience. One evening, during a routine tour, a guest, a quiet woman in her late 40s, lagged behind in the library. She seemed transfixed by the desk, her fingers brushing lightly over the carvings on its surface. When the guide asked her to rejoin the group, the woman whispered, "He's waiting for someone brave enough to open it." Later that night, the woman was spotted again, pacing the grounds after dark. No one could recall seeing her leave. The next morning, a single sheet of paper was found in the library, neatly folded on the desk surface. It wasn't there the night before. On it was a hastily scrawled passage, "The truth lies beneath. But beware, for the truth is alive." The handwriting bore an uncanny resemblance to Hemingway's own. Fueling the house's mystique is an enduring legend about a hidden passageway connected to the library. During Hemingway's time, it was rumored that he built a private escape route beneath the house, perhaps for clandestine affairs or to conceal items of great personal significance. In 2023, an engineering team inspecting the property's foundation made a startling discovery: a hollow void beneath the floorboards of the library. However, before the exploration could proceed, their tools malfunctioned, and 2 of the workers reported an overwhelming sense of dread, refusing to re-enter the house. To this day, no one knows what lies below, but locals tell of faint whispers that can be heard if you press your ear to the library floor, faint, unintelligible murmurs that grow louder when the room is empty. On moonless nights, staff occasionally find the door to the library ajar, even though it is always locked before closing. Surveillance cameras have captured strange phenomena. The door creaking open as if pushed by an unseen force, shadows flitting past shelves, and, on one occasion, the faint sound of a typewriter's keys clicking in the dead of night. The most unnerving recording came during a hurricane evacuation. The house had been locked and deserted, but the cameras picked up a figure standing by the desk, staring directly into the lens. The figure's face was obscured, but his stance, broad shoulders, hands tucked into his pockets, matched Hemingway's unmistakable silhouette. Moments later, the screen went black, as though something or someone had reached out to turn off the camera. Despite the warnings, some cannot resist the allure of Hemingway's secrets. A wealthy collector recently offered to fund the opening of the desk, but the curator refused, claiming it would disturb the balance of the house. Shortly after the refusal, the curator reported receiving a dream in which Hemingway himself appeared. He was standing in the library, staring at the desk with a grim expression. When the curator tried to speak, Hemingway turned and said in a deep, resonant voice, "Leave it closed." Some stories aren't meant to be told, but what did Hemingway mean? And what could be so dangerous within that even his restless spirit seeks to guard it? For now, the Ernest Hemingway house remains a place of wonder and unease, its mysteries deepening with every unanswered question. Yet, for those who step inside, the air carries an unspoken challenge. Will you dare to uncover the truth? Or will you heed the warnings of a ghostly guardian and leave the story unfinished? Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. A seasoned guide, Patrick, known for his skepticism of ghost stories, began noticing strange patterns during his shifts. Tourists often mentioned hearing faint whispers or feeling a hand brush past them in the library, but Patrick dismissed these as tricks of the imagination. One evening, while closing up after a private tour, he noticed something unusual. The library door, which he had locked earlier, was slightly ajar. As he approached, the air grew colder, and a faint, rhythmic tapping echoed from within. Steeling himself, Patrick stepped inside. On the desk was a notebook he had never seen before, its cover faded and worn. The title was scrawled in Hemingway's unmistakable hand, The Final Chapter. Unable to resist, Patrick opened the notebook. It was blank, except for a single line written in fresh ink, "You found me. Now you must finish it." The next morning, Patrick didn't show up for work. His car remained parked outside the house, but he was nowhere to be found. The only clue? The notebook, now missing from the desk. Shortly after Patrick's disappearance, rumors about the hidden passageway resurfaced. One evening, during a violent thunderstorm, a night guard noticed a faint glow emanating from the cracks in the library's wooden floorboards. Intrigued but wary, he knelt down and pressed his ear to the ground. The whispers returned, clearer this time. They were fragmented phrases, as if someone or something was trying to communicate. The key. Unlock the desk. Beneath the light, summoning his courage, the guard pried up one of the loose floorboards, revealing a small brass key tarnished with age. Convinced it was the key to Hemingway's locked desk, he turned to place it on the desk for the curators. But the moment he stood up, the library door slammed shut behind him. When backup arrived hours later, the guard was found unconscious, the key gone, and the desk still locked. The glow beneath the floorboards had vanished. A visiting author, intrigued by the stories, spent a night in the house with special permission. Determined to channel Hemingway's spirit, she set up her typewriter in the library and began writing. Her notes, later discovered scattered across the room, described a sensation of being watched and the overwhelming urge to write passages that weren't her own. In her final entry, she scribbled frantically, "It's not Hemingway. It's something else. Something older. It wears his face, but it's not him. The desk must stay locked. It must stay buried." She was found the next morning, sitting motionless in Hemingway's chair, her hands trembling. She refused to speak of what she had experienced but abandoned her writing career entirely. The mystery deepened when a group of paranormal researchers brought state-of-the-art equipment to the library. They captured what they described as an electronic voice phenomenon. In the recording, a deep, gravelly voice whispered a fragmented sentence. "The desk is the beginning of the end." The footage was uploaded to a private server but vanished within hours, as if someone or something had erased all evidence of their investigation. What lies within the locked desk? And what force guards its secrets so fiercely? Each new discovery raises more questions than answers, and those who dig too deeply often find themselves entangled in a web of disappearances, whispers, and warnings. The desk remains locked. The floorboards are silent. But the house waits for the one who dares to finish the story Hemingway never could. Months after the author's terrifying ordeal, a new artifact surfaced in the library, a vintage Underwood typewriter, identical to the one Hemingway had used during his time in Key West. Curators assumed it was an anonymous donation, but no records indicated how or when it arrived. The typewriter was placed on display, admired by tourists, until one evening, when a docent stayed late to prepare for an upcoming exhibit. As she locked the doors and turned to leave, the unmistakable clatter of typewriter keys echoed through the empty house. She spun around, heart pounding, to see the Underwood vibrating on its stand. Its ribbon, worn and faded, moved of its own accord, spelling out one ominous sentence: "Not everything buried stays dead." The docent fled, refusing to return to work. The typewriter has since been moved to storage, but staff claim they still hear faint tapping sounds coming from its crate late at night. During a routine cleaning of the library, a staff member accidentally bumped into the tall, ornate mirror near Hemingway's desk. The frame shifted slightly, revealing a hollow space behind it. Hidden inside was a yellowed manuscript bound with fraying twine. The title read, "The Other Side of the Sea, a work unknown to Hemingway scholars." The first few pages were typical of his style, but as the narrative progressed, the writing grew erratic, almost frantic. The protagonist, a writer isolated in a tropical paradise, begins to unravel after discovering a cursed artifact hidden in his home. The final pages devolved into illegible scrawls, with repeated phrases like, "It watches me," and "Do not let it out." When the staff attempted to move the manuscript to a secure archive, the mirror shattered spontaneously, sending shards flying across the room. None of the shards reflected the library instead. They showed fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure standing behind the desk. The manuscript was returned to its hiding place, and the mirror was replaced. But staff now avoid looking too long into its reflection. Key West locals speak in hushed tones about the night of the great hurricane that struck the island in 2024. While the town braced itself, a strange phenomenon occurred at the Hemingway House. Neighbors reported seeing the library lights flicker on and off, though the house had been evacuated and the power to the area was cut. One brave soul, a retired fisherman, claimed he saw a figure silhouetted against the library window as the storm raged. The man, tall and broad-shouldered, appeared to be writing feverishly at the desk. Thunder cracked, and the figure stood abruptly, turning to face the window. The fisherman swore he saw piercing eyes staring directly at him before the lights went out completely. When the storm passed, the library was found untouched, save for one inexplicable detail. The oak desk, locked for decades, now sat slightly ajar. Inside, the faint scent of cigar smoke lingered, and a single sheet of paper lay on the surface. The message read, "The story ends when I say it does." Days after the storm, the brass key found beneath the floorboards reappeared, this time lying in plain sight on the library desk. No one admitted to moving it, but the curator, desperate to solve the mystery, called a locksmith to try the key on the desk's lock. The locksmith turned the key carefully, the mechanism groaning as if resisting. Just as the lock clicked open, the room was overwhelmed by a sudden chill, and every window slammed shut simultaneously. The curator, trembling, pulled open the desk drawer. Inside was a stack of yellowed papers, each blank save for one repeated phrase. "He is not done." The key vanished again that night, and the desk remains open, but no one dares to look inside for long. Those who linger near it often complain of strange dreams, filled with crashing waves, shadowy figures, and a voice calling from the depths, "Finish the story, or it will finish you." What force guards the Ernest Hemingway house? And what terrible truth lies hidden within its walls? The answers seem to ebb and flow like the tides, always out of reach yet drawing the curious ever closer. The house waits, its secrets locked in an endless loop of whispers, warnings, and the faint clatter of unseen typewriter keys. After years of unanswered questions, the Hemingway house was set to undergo a full restoration, funded by a wealthy literary enthusiast named Margaret Blackwell. Margaret, a self-proclaimed skeptic of the supernatural, insisted on uncovering the mysteries of the house as part of the project. She was particularly fascinated by the locked desk and its connection to Hemingway's unfinished stories. Equipped with historical documents, Margaret approached the library one stormy evening, accompanied by a locksmith and a small team of archivists. As thunder rolled in the distance, the locksmith hesitated, recounting the eerie tales he'd heard about the house. Margaret dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand and instructed him to proceed. When the desk's lock finally clicked open, the air in the room grew still, as if holding its breath. Margaret slowly pulled out the drawer, revealing an unassuming stack of papers bound with a crimson ribbon. The top sheet bore the title, "The Final Chapter," in Hemingway's bold handwriting. Margaret began reading aloud, her voice steady despite the oppressive silence. The story described a writer trapped in a house, tormented by the lingering presence of his own unfinished works. As the pages turned, Margaret realized the story was eerily reflective of the present moment, detailing her team, their actions, and even the exact storm raging outside. The deeper she read, the more surreal the narrative became. It described a woman opening a forbidden drawer, releasing something ancient and restless into the world. As Margaret reached the final page, her voice faltered. The last line read, and when she speaks the last word, the house will no longer belong to the living. Before anyone could react, the library doors slammed shut, trapping the team inside. The lights flickered violently, and the sound of crashing waves filled the air, though the house was miles from the shore. The room grew colder as an unseen force swept through, scattering papers and toppling books. A shadow began to coalesce near the desk, a towering figure with broad shoulders and piercing eyes. It was Hemingway or something that wore his likeness. His presence was both commanding and oppressive, his gaze fixed on Margaret. "You should not have opened it," the figure growled. His voice layered with something deeper, older. "The story is mine to finish." Terrified, Margaret stammered, "What do you want?" The figure pointed to the stack of papers on the desk. "Right," it commanded. Against her will, Margaret felt her hand move, gripping a pen and scrawling words across the blank pages. The story poured out of her in a frenzy, as if the house itself was using her as a vessel. The archivists and locksmith could only watch in horror as Margaret's eyes glazed over, her movements mechanical. As the last word was written, the storm outside ceased abruptly, plunging the house into an unnatural silence. The shadowy figure smiled faintly, its form beginning to dissipate. "It is done," it whispered before vanishing entirely. Margaret collapsed, the pen falling from her hand. When she regained consciousness, the room was eerily normal. The papers were gone, the desk empty, and the oppressive energy lifted. The team helped her to her feet, but no one spoke of what they had witnessed. The restoration project was quietly canceled, and Margaret disappeared from public life. Rumors spread that she burned every journal and manuscript in her possession, claiming she could still hear Hemingway's voice urging her to write. Visitors to the Hemingway house report that the library feels different now, calmer, as if the spirit tethered there has finally found peace. The typewriter remains locked in storage, and the desk is once again sealed. Yet, on quiet nights, when the wind brushes through the palm trees, some claim they hear the faint clatter of keys and a deep voice murmuring, "Every story must end." The Ernest Hemingway house stands as a monument to both a literary legend and an enduring mystery. Whether the spirit of Hemingway lingers or something far older lies beneath its surface, one truth remains: some stories are better left unfinished. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.